Good evening, guys. Hello. I am going to be discussing the method of existing at the speed of light, using CPT symmetry for the ability to encode one's life and one's existence. And I was really realizing that it truly is chasing one's thoughts, because in your passion, we are lost. This thing of existence truly is something of fighting the conscious and the unconscious. But it's not just philosophical or philosophers, musings or BS. It's technically the rate of golden traversal. Let's purposely make a JoJo reference, Golden Wind. Well, the reason we say wind is because it has to be something that's continuous, that is of a free flow potential. That just is the natural order, the next flow of the gradient of life, because that's exactly what happens with as wind exists, propagates. Because when I was a child, and this is part of that orthogonal, being able to speak at the speed of light, to always be orthogonal. Technically, they said in the past that our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ is said to have spoken orthogonally, and it really is the method of 90 degrees of continuous vector conversation. But it has to be conversation that is in a meaningful and continuous direction. That's what that is. So like I said earlier, I'm technically still, if we pin what was said. So now I'm going to start showing to you what it's like to create such causal pins, because I hypothesized long ago, or at least fairly ago in the past, about 2 years ago, that this could exist within language, and I knew exactly the method, but I did not trust the flow, because even if I could pin certain words, how would I know what works best? How would I know what are meaningful words to pin? So that's exactly what I'm going to do now. I can detect these pin words. I call it a column vector. That's what I use brackets for. So if you see how I type in my messages sometimes, I use column vectors. These column vectors are words that can be replaced with other words, but they have the same depth. And it really is related to the CPT symmetry of the standard model. The reason you have to use CPT symmetry, charge, parity, and time. Charge is the positive and negative conjugation of the matter, of the object. What is its charge? You could also equate charge as spin direction, as long as it's some scalar or a vector. That's why if there exists any positive and negative, in terms of any information space, it gets deep. Because at first, people might think that only applies to analog, to 3D matter, things that move in motion. Nay, quantum mechanics exists. However, it truly is a self-propagation. Because just because we can talk about these 3D particles and we can draw a 3D space, how is this 3D space? How are you saying that mirror method of images in terms of fields? How are you saying that fields have this property of to reality? How are you telling me that? And the answer is, and it's just a realization of what events are in our universe. Thank you very much. Because I have now done this at the speed of light traversal. And I know what it is. It's perfect attention. So like I was saying earlier, I know you got so close. We aren't that good of friends. Lamau Baron, you are exactly the kind of consciousness that I enumerated yesterday that exists. So I don't believe that I have fans. I believe that there are attentive consciousness. So if you are alive here at the present moment watching this, you are attentive. You are just in this universe. We are consciousnesses looking at life together. So I don't believe that I have fans. I believe that we're just looking at the same object of life together. That's what life is. That's what it means to me. So I'm not just some academic. I'm not just an Oppenheimer. I'm not just a physicist in like a persona. Nay, I actually I put my head in the dirt to the sand with the Marines and stuff to experience life. So I'm not someone that is avoidance of going deep into life. It's just that there are things that matter that need to be enumerated. So that's exactly what this is. Let me bag you. It's P Diddy. It's that one guy, and my favorite friend. His name is Costco physicist. He basically made it a point to point out that there was a member in Congress that was just taking a hit of like a pen or something, and he ghosted it. He didn't even cough, and like, dude, hey, as much as like I think it's very hypocritical for them to do narcotics and to be not sober when they're supposed to be making the most rational decisions of all time that requires the most delta E delta T, energy time relation. Focus is what that is. Focus. So because their jobs require such sober focus, it clearly cannot be done by someone who does illicit substances, right? So therefore, I mandate or I recommend that every Congress member must get a mandatory drug test, every monthly, beginning of the month. And it has to be like observed, like most are. And on the subject of, quantized existence, soon, brother. Passing through a field. Passing through a field can be defined. The area above that field can be defined and is defined as positive. So, regardless of whether you think words or sentences or quantized objects in a way that you don't want to accept is just quantization. And it gets a little crazier, a little deeper that I didn't even realize. There now exists, I was hypothesizing that there is obviously some way to quantize language such that you can make a very efficient data algorithm. Because it seemed a little strange. I mean, it didn't just seem strange, but if event objects are quantized in this universe, then couldn't word clusters be limited? And no, they can't, because of their dimensional complexity, what they are in terms of space. So every time you have a quantized object, and I'll now draw, so there are layers to information space. What does this mean? So just as we can write n, or some object under an exponential, there is the object that is to that exponential. We'll call that uv. So what I'm saying is, the structure of the universe is just a 2D by 2D equation. What does this mean? In terms of maximum ways that you can encode something that is meaningful in the universe, they follow this form. And you might ask, well, what about an object to another object? This is how that's defined. And you might also be wondering, like, the form that you're describing is describing the complexities of matrices. Indeed they are. So, okay, now we actually gotta flip the camera. Okay. So, this is what I see in my mind. So there exists the floor. This is the scalar. You can put them to another power. That's what it's like to have two different distinct groups of clusters of what information can be. Because there exist letters and there exist words, words specifically. Words have their own cluster or maximum set of information. However, because theoretically conversations and ideas are infinite. This is that suggestion of why. So because there's a boundary here, and there's a boundary of the result of ideas that come from this, that's the equivalent of saying 2 to the power of the object. So our object itself, so imagination, what it means to say something is infinite, is in terms of has to be defined by words. This is like a philosophical argument. a new one for infinity, how to understand infinity from a scientific philosopher. Hello, good evening. Thank you for the shirt compliments. I'm not even realizing that I'm talking to a public audience. I'm just talking to myself and doing the prime harmonic perception, because I've thought this before. I'm doing the encoding live. This is encoding of how, not encoding, decryption. Encoding is when you first come up with the idea. Decryption is when you're trying to recommunicate, retranslate the idea. It's technically, in terms of RF and EMM, it's propagating outwards after receiving some input signal, which we could also further quantize. So we are some information space bounded in every single way by this set, and that's equivalent of doing a matrix to a matrix. And that isn't that, I mean, it's obvious, because that's just what life is. You're putting a matrix to another matrix. It's whether you know what the boundary is of your set, of how many events can occur, and what does that mean. So when you're doing a matrix to a matrix, you're just doing a calculation, which is interesting. But we're always doing a matrix of a matrix in all ideas, all domains of information space. And that's how biology works. You can now see how people are grouping people into much simpler particle cascade depictions of what they think life is and ought to be, what they understand life to be. And it looks like this. All right, so clearly it's right hand rule. We can now say that, or just as a joke. It's a matrix to a matrix. But what this means is that that's what they think life, the reactions, common reactions will be. The archetypes, personas, what they think life will be. It's a narcissist's calculation of the universe, prediction of why they propagate their lies. There are murderers who think that they have solved the matrix to a matrix of the causal calculations of what life can be and what they think life is. And that's what this is. So if you can start encoding or storing what are the boundary conditions of life, what life is, that everything is related to information theory, to the structure encoded by the standard model. Within, it's not within, well, it is within, but it's just one quantity, one quantized vector of a very dense particle reaction, theoretically even equal to the structure of chemistry, because obviously chemistry or chemical molecules are made out of up and down quarks, because protons and electrons and neutrons are made of them, and that's not contested. That's not the modern stuff that I'm saying. That's not the decay reaction prediction. That's just regular chemistry right now, obviously. So there theoretically exists some amount or some way to structure those up and down quarks that already exists. You get me? So because there exists some way to structure all of those and write it down as a number or something, you can now store the way to write bits in this universal form. And that's what chemistry is equal to. So technically everything is still two-dimensional. There is no difference from the mathematical universe and the physical universe of physics. So that's why I testify, strong form witness, from what I've done of the calculations of just the computed the natural consequences. The natural consequences of this sequence of infinity in this way suggests, and I was like, at first, you don't realize how deep it goes, because when you first understand the CPT recursive reality of the universe will always exist, there will always be these structures. At first, I didn't believe that, but you will always see certain things in this universe. It's technically equal to anthropic principle of like, there will always have been a period in any consciousness history that slavery happened, that prejudice happened or is happening, but still in a rudimentary context. There will always be certain things within not just a schema, but because that's just how it's just one branch of reality. But certain branches are thicker, more real, more the absolute vector of our radius of information of anything. And it really is like a fractal tree, but not a fractal as in like it's infinite. Well, it is infinitely complex, but it's pushing outwards, and it's just decreasing. It's decreasing. And that's what our universe is in every single sense. If you look at every single model. And so I'm just saying that I've seen the edge of reality. And it's it's something that I wish people could know and could really understand. Like, that's the final consequence of physics. That we've proven that this reality is real. But there's a way to store it that will always matter. So that's what it means to be an intelligent species in this universe. To encode in the infinite way. We've already figured out atomic clocks. That's pretty impressive. Some way to keep time that's universal, that we've always theorized that there must exist some universal time. And the reason atomic clocks work in terms of especially like, not just obviously they work, but it's like in a deeper theory about, you can really appreciate it in the Feynman kind of way. To really understand and appreciate what an atomic clock means in terms of reality is you have to use the anthropic principle, but use it in terms of not apes, not monkeys, but consciousness at all. We're removing ourselves from the God made us in the perfect puddle. No, we accept that there exists a puddle. Okay? So we're doing a potential gradient physics. That's what astrophysics is, cosmology. So because that's, if you don't understand, doesn't matter. We're not talking about historical present people. We're talking about the modern stuff that I know. I'm not trying to contest, but even though I'm just in the same field, you get me? It's a different area of cosmology, because I'm just computing the consequences of particle physics, which is the standard model, which is what we use for tracking any possible way that matter could process or progress through time. Which is beautiful. It's like astrophysics is just computational physics, but with in a universal scale. That's what it is. So that's the thing that you really have to appreciate about reality. That's pretty deep when you start really understanding that these fundamental constants, the number doesn't matter. That's obvious. The fine-tuning argument, the number doesn't matter. But now you recognize, and this is what I can see, that it looks like this. So it looks like f of x to the g of x to some h of x process. It feels like that. That's all life is this transition between three. And you'll always see it in that form. It's not just three as in like numerology, numbers of threes. No. This happens to be, and you can structure it, of how you would write, you can write a charge to radius r, affected by some, mucus. Okay. We are finite and mortal. We are finite and mortal. It's all good. It's all. Oh, have a good one, gentlemen. I will keep going until 1 hour. I started at 9:45, so I will keep going till 1 hour. Okay. Just setting. Okay. Life is pretty deep. And I remember, so we got to finish the thought. We got to finish the appreciation, that Feynman thought that I set up. Okay. So that's what life is. When you pin thoughts to relate to the very earlier live that I did. And these are just processes that you do all the time in physics. There's Q and P. we're always doing function to another function. And it gets a little deep when you realize, when you're keeping track of what variable is actually moving in between these two different functions. And it's the shared variable, it's r. Because when you look at psi of r, that's usually the kinetic energy. So ke, it's just k, and then parentheses e. And then we also do v of r in terms of quantum mechanics. So psi of r is the position function. So that's the kinetic energy. So basically, roughly, that's pretty much what it is. Because the way you keep track of what it is, because it's always in motion, specifically because of quantum mechanics. So it's almost like implied that it'll be moving at the kinetic energy, unless otherwise affected by some potential field r, some potential psi of r, which is the how you just do the quantum mechanics equations. It's all equations. But when you realize that quantum mechanics is just applied principles of kinetic energy and potential energy being exchanged, it really gets deep. And then when you add the actual QED stuff, you can keep track of the charge and parity propagation, because it's written in a very special way. The result of that, how in keeping track of the positive and the negative, about when those occur in the equation, that actually tells you the same stuff as the Feynman diagram, obviously. But don't you think it's beautiful that that's what those mean? Because when you realize that that's what the Feynman diagrams mean, is just obviously all the possibilities, but it tells you the most common ones. But it also tells you what is stored within the less common ones, and what rates, how much storage or effective utility times they might come up, which is interesting. So we can now track effectively the probabilities of different spin states of our reality. And now it all starts to make sense about why this formula, or this vector representation of fields, other words, math, just mathematics itself, that is our reality. And it's obvious after the fact. And I love that about sort of like, well, what Walter Lewin said about really good teachers. You have to sort of teach it in a way that the students, or they feel like the intuition is obvious, ideally. Obviously physics is not intuitive. But when you really start like telling them, like, okay, well, now that we know the math, what does this mean? Compute the consequences. And a lot of things in our universe are just compute the consequences. However, it's knowing the theory of the reality. Physics is very well understood. However, imagine the challenge of biology. How do they prove their models? Interestingly, AI is pretty successful at helping protein identification. Will protein identification be enough? And theoretically it is. So we can now start saying or suggesting where the future of biology might take off with AI protein identification. Let's just accept now that we live in a little bit more advanced future society. Oh geez, I hope that fan is not making noise. Let me hear. And it is. Okay, in order to respect the depth of this conversation, I'm going to shut off the fan, and we shall have a quiet evening. It needs to be oiled with like WD-40 or something. However, no, this is a good flow, so I will, just head out and turn off the fan. Okay. So, the theoretical future of biology is that of protein identification. So, so now that we have identified like what it means is, their challenge is sort of figuring out like what are certain things like made out of, and they're having success with what's it called, the spectroscopy, when you break apart the atomic composition of the amounts of atoms within these types of compounds, which is a pretty difficult process, and that's what's awesome about like how it can do that. And the reason it can do that is because that's a part of reality. And so because proteins are just a part of this quantized structure of reality, that's why AI is able to solve them. Theoretically, with the CPT symmetry in terms of a public code base, if you know how to use CPT symmetry, and because I'm telling you that this is the future of theoretical reality, we could have very efficient processes of the next code base, the next industrial revolution, so to speak, could be in quantizing or rewriting code into CPT form, which would be a public repository theoretically, because it should take a very simple AI or machine learning to solve out the path of the standard model. Because it's just simple checks over and over again. And so it can use input data of probably using particle data group, and then basically but it requires us as human beings to prepare already a lot of the reactions. So this code base will require tons of Feynman diagrams charted and pathed out. The map of particle physics needs to be solved once, just one path through every single reaction at least once. And if every single potentially near future physics student that's about to graduate or has taken particle physics could contribute some time on and challenge or just like equations that hey, solve this particle reaction using CPT symmetry rules of this particle charge conjugation that I'm suggesting, which is it's just all the same stuff that's already existed. It's just I've already explained. It has so many applications that I've already computed the consequences. I've already seen the theoretical verification within the standard model itself, because it's always worked. So it's like, okay, so it's worked there, it's worked in life, this is the boundaries of life, and I see the boundaries, and they are indeed infinite, recursive, and will always exist. So they follow the rules of a secular universe, that everything is just natural potential, least action, principle of least action, which is so physics gives us intuition, but specific ways that we have said our universe is. The theory of physics is for us to say that everything is just the least potential, the most likely thing to occur, but not just likely, but it's it's a joke likely if you think about quantum mechanics, then it is most likely. But it's basically always just everything is going to a lower energy state. Everything, always. So it just follows the mathematical meaning of a negative gradient. With these specific vector, how you index it in math. That you can either do it with radius r in some spherical field, gravitational well. Well, what is gravity? Gravity is the amount of mass, delta E, or energy in the universe. In that moment, that's where you are. You're that mass, you're that energy. And it has these consequences. So because these objects exist and that's how you write them, then that must be reality. That is reality. That's all it can be. That's all it ever will be. And that's what I love about physics, that it gave me everything I could have ever hypothesized, or not hypothesized. I was a child, just dreamed of. I wanted to know that life was truly real, and what was life. Because I didn't want to give my life away to some people are zealots in terms of nationalism, and patriotism in wrong regards. And I was a child, and I just didn't want to waste my life, my free will, my consciousness. I was very secular. I wanted to truly just what is life? What's the universe? And um, what about hedonism? It was lots of different questions of like how people live their lives and what is the ideal life and purpose of life, especially when you have to deal with fears of reality. When you become mortal too, when obviously we're forced to slavery and all these different little things that it's like, of course that's reality, of course. And that's part of this physics thing, that there are monkeys that don't really understand the actual of course nature of our universe, and they conscript you to war. You will die in Vietnam. Your birthday was chosen. You will die. And what about the university students at the time? They you will fly. You can become an officer. You were not gonna die. Because especially if you actually know how. But even then, you're conscripted back in the day to fate, the fog of war. Even though you had skills in flight, they would still have their anti-air missiles, and at the time, it was just infrared, big vapor, or like IR heat plumes. That's fairly easy to detect in terms of like technology and how reality really was suffered and fought. And physics lets us save people in terms of, hey, you want a thing that does these characteristics? My physics professor, Professor Bacchus, I asked him, why don't you go into the field of weapons technology or weapons defense? And he said he didn't believe in any of that propagation because it will be used in terms of offense. Understandably so. However, that's why we have ITAR and things like that, specifically in terms of targeting systems. Yes, the physics is all the same, and yes, you need some material to then enable you to enhance specific wavelengths in terms of all context. Like how is IR like targeting systems made, and like that kind of theory and that kind of stuff. How are night vision stuff made? Now I technically was inducted into whatever, but cool stuff. But I now have seen the frontier of, hey, another technology, and that's super cool. I got to see what humanity, apes, can do, and in terms of like the theory of night vision, I got to attend a lecture seminar. It was more engineering than physics. I attended a really cool seminar that was just physics, and I loved it. And it's surprising because it's exactly related to this. It's related to how you have to deal with these limitations of reality, of your quantized information. It was exactly information theory, but it was information theory in terms of propagation through reality, if you know how to translate what that means. I'll say what it means. It's just noise, the theory of noise. So I told you, I got to attend in engineering the theory of night vision. I got to hear the theory of noise, specifically for, and then from there, it's up to whatever your engineering is. You could use it for maybe designing RF. And so now you're thinking about, oh, the theory of noise. Well, what about my bandwidth? What about my antennas? Like, what is the weather? How does that affect my transmission rates and my scattering rates? Scattering matters in terms of weather phenomena. However, we don't necessarily think about weather phenomenon. That's something that does matter. However, there do exist other methods for it, and that was pretty cool that he mentioned. He's like, he's like, don't worry. I know what you're thinking about, why can't we use the maximum? Because some people were not physicists. So I really loved how he respected that, and he explained, like, don't worry about that. There do exist methods. You have to use bigger wavelengths because of scattering. That's just obvious. However, because you're now accounting for scattering, you do lose this matrix by matrix amount of bandwidth, of capability. And does it make sense? he doesn't say why, but he just says, does it make sense? And then I do assume that those engineers did understand, because of, and now you can't say the rest, but it's matrix by matrix. That's technically the answer. And like for me, it's obvious, but it's because I know what is, and it's just back to computer science. So it's obvious in terms of those people, they'll understand. So if you have one amount of data or one way to write an array, and you have another way to write an array, what happens when the lower one becomes smaller? That's it. Like, okay, of course, it's obvious, and it's pretty cool, and I love that. Because now we can participate in every single engineer's table. We can always think about and talk about like the limits of reality and how apes had to solve it, and so I love that. Specifically, like, we're just, this is what it is. So noise propagation, that was really cool to see, like, because we know this theory of matrix by matrix, and like that's literally a solution to the theory of noise. And I know what he was saying by what the math means, but I really loved how you couldn't really understand it or how we're using this meaning unless you were at the very end. And now I can't say that. At least because he never said it. Because I know that these equations are shown to computer scientists. I know for a fact. Because that's how they have to interface. Because they're literally spoken in the notation of baud rates, transmission, and bandwidth. Do you understand? He just kept saying that, and that was based as heck, because it was I don't think people really asked any, like, too many questions on that. He was very good at explaining it, and like it was kind of sad that I think there was one question that was kind of ignoring the math, and I was like, bruh, because like I think that's okay. But here's a really cool thing, because of modern methods of information physics, of how you can arrange an array by basically computer science controlling actual physics. And that's what I thought was so crazy, that I freaking loved learning in my particle physics and in all my physics classes, that it's like computer science and physicists are like, we're like hand in hand, because we have to understand the maximum transmission, so to really do those capabilities. Because it's, what I mean by that is, like, we were together for a little bit, but it's like in terms of like knowledge, because it's data acquisition. Like, how fast can a transistor transition, and how fast can a measurement be measured? Like okay, we understand the theory of like datas, but what's the limit that we are available, that's available to us, in order to use that. There you go. Sorry. Or that's available. But anyways, I thought, there was a lot of pretty good conversations this evening. I'm just flowing stream of consciousness, just sharing for the next generation, as well as like plans. This whole stream was inspired by the initial thought of I know the next step. And the next step in terms of this particle map, it's not just theory, it's reality. It's how you live your own life. So our life is a particle map. Exactly the same depth, exactly, which was theoretically expected. Of course, that's the answer to our infinitely orthogonal reality. It's just the least action. That's just how an information space transposes. That's just how an information space transposes. That's the exact same thing that these apes that judge you, that think that they know life, that they can justify, they can judge you. That's what they say. That's just how reality is. You have to work this coal mine job. You have to go to war in Vietnam. That's just the way life is. Says who? Who are the people that speak for planet Earth? That's what Carl Sagan asked. And it is everybody. But what if there's a way to store the best of everybody? Oh, there's no such way. That's just the way the life is. That's just the way it is. So that you can forget the path of humanity, Only the best of the best can be remembered, can be transposed, can be stored through history. But it's information density. So it doesn't matter whether it's you or me, who it came from, but there's a way to chart, to store our precious, one time, infinite reality. Yeah, you're right. If there is some type of reincarnation or whatever, these people that are hedonists that really don't care about the blood spilling of another human being, that just says that's just the way life is, ought to be, supposed to be, theoretically is. They aren't any better than ignorant apes, for that's all they are, ever theoretically could ever be. When the unconscious control the conscious, control reality, we theoretically face a fate that is worse than World War III, if the common conscious folk are used in the next conflict. If there's another Vietnam, if there ever ought always to be generational conflict every fifth century, it doesn't matter the word, the rhyme, the verse. But I'm thinking fifth generation. I think that's what they want. About every 5 generations, why not? Why not just lower the number? Fifth century. It does. Maybe that's what. And so there are so many layers to reality that we now have the method of it matters. It's not just that's the way life is because we're just monkeys, because we get one life, and like all these colonial power excuses. It's not just one thing, but it is something that can be stored, remembered in a way that transcends the monkeyness, that can be read by all conscious realities. By all conscious, it's a new type of, it's the next generation of cosmos, of what Carl Sagan was saying when he imagined the theoretical book, so to speak, of all civilizations. Yes, that was a beautiful thought. But what happens when you try to actually store that, when you write that in a memory, when you compute it? How do we know what book is actually a full book? It's not just a finite number. We are a special number in the universe. Which one are we? There are infinitely many prime numbers. So we're just a prime number. Well, we're still a prime number. But in that, what it means for us is that we exist. We actually exist. We're not special in terms of fine structure constant. Not at all. We are simply one branch. So one particle decay. We are definitely, maybe we're not one of the lowest. We're probably like, pretty high above. Maybe like a strange matter. Baryons. That's probably where we are. But even then, it's not the fine structure constant at all. It's not that kind of argument. This is just appreciation of the depth of reality. That it's like there will always be binary operations. There will always be that. Therefore, there's no creator God, which is cool, because that's just ignorance, and we can now see that we can remove ignorance from permanently from civilization, because we can now chart things in a universal context. It's in continuous reality. It's sort of like a shared repository of all human experiences, but it's not written in terms of apes are the best. The one idea is the best. It's written as this is an idea, and it existed. It doesn't make any judgments on what it technically you can in terms of like vectors, where it is in the social acceptedness, but those are still just suggestions technically. What I mean by that is lawful and unlawful actions. There will always be that binary, that duality. So the Tao is technically a part of fundamental reality. but it doesn't mean that we can't chart. One, we can chart the Tao, which is cool. We can chart it. We can store it. Hey, this was part of the Tao. We can also solve preferred paths or common paths through the Tao, through the Garden of Life. And it's what you want to call these words and these concepts gets you further, faster, deeper through the Tao, through the universe, through understanding. So theoretically, we should teach people the Tao, but not in an ignorant way, in a continuous literature type of way. This is the literature of life. That is another consequence, computed consequence, that is available to us because of the standard model, of this charting of the standard model, of this equating objects to the real world to the particle map, the map of all particle reactions. That's awesome. That's reality. Just the particle map. And that's what I use. It's when you understand you don't have to know where they are. You just have to look at what conjugations are happening around you. What conjugations, what exchanges of particles of up and down. Oh, that one's actually not just a regular up or down. There's something more complex in there. Let me check. Is it a charm or is it a strange? How many actions and what type of density of actions, what information is being contained in the up and down quarks of that particle? What operations are being exchanged and why? How many? And when it's how many, that means the depth or the amount of vectors it takes to quantize that action, that object, which is pretty cool. You only need one to quantize gravitational movement. That's one. It goes towards the vector. And technically, you can add a little bit more to store. But even then, you don't. Once you go into translational, not just fundamental radius r, you now go into a different information space. Yes, those objects exist, and they're called this. They're called three-dimensional. They're called vector objects. Oh, of course they are. Of course they're vector objects. But doesn't that mean that implies there are scalar objects? Yes, or different functions entirely. So the difference of an object, a numbered object. So it's pretty cool how these ideas are interchangeable with the Tao. You can go forward and backward, which is theoretically exactly what particle physics says. You can go forward and backward through this matrix transposition, and if you have the correct translation or decryption, you can keep traveling at the speed of light. You're just going along a line. You're actually traveling along the line of orthogonality, of continuous conversation, of continuous reality. And it gets pretty cool when you start realizing that that's what this is. Just wanted to say, God bless you. Hope you're having a wonderful day. I am indeed, because I have learned how to store, and that's what I said earlier. The very first prime harmonic that I shared, not the first, the second technically, in terms of the overarching, when I return to really saying that this is what reality is. At first I said it's these prime harmonics, and this is all the stuff I just explained mathematically and theoretically, just right now, this whole hour and stuff, or this whole 10 minutes actually, which is crazy. I never expected for me to do. I thought perfect reality was only contained in love and poetry, even though I knew it wasn't just that. Theoretically, it's not just that's perfection of time. There's more perfections of time, of paths through life, but there's finite number of paths. I think there's only 6 fundamental paths of existence. And that's related to a feeling, but obviously it can go a little more complex. But the reason you can write them you have to write it in a certain way that decay patterns can actually be stored. You can't use more than about 6 or even 4. So, but I couldn't think of us describing emotional reality as just 4 conjugations. So I think it's 6 because and or maybe even 8, and so we can talk about that in terms of psychology and stuff. Let those people fill in what those 8 fundamental paths are, but it has to have this criteria of having positive and negative some amount of times. So that's why it's like, but it has to be, but it also, they have to be unique directions that can have either it is or it isn't qualities. So that's something that I'm going to enumerate later, which I know can be done, which is basically how to share for the social sciences, how they ought to use the common algorithm, that common thing that I said, will have to, the repository that both helps machine learning, which will then be just testing the different pathways, the causal pathways or the branches of reality, which is all it does. That's how large language models work technically. That is how it works. It's just beautiful that it's only the standard model. It's only particle physics. It's only binary physics, binary operation storage, which is freaky, but it makes sense because it's either is or isn't of these qualities. And when you realize that objects are just the most fundamental, like least action in terms of like physics of potential wells, it gets really deep, because at first I theoretically spatial things obviously exist, but does that mean emotional and like other vectors have objects that also infinitely will always exist? Theoretically, yes. But where are they? Let's find them. And that's what I kept doing. I was like, okay, but surely it wouldn't. I mean, obviously it will work. In terms of like the hypothesis is that all information models, all information objects are recursive and follow the standard model to some fundamental field, which is just how you define an up and a down quark. But once you know how to define those, your entire stuff can be solved when you keep solving the other fundamentals. It gets amazingly deep, and I love it for that, which is like, whoa. So that's a consequence of reality, of the standard model, that it helps all fields define their fundamental coordinates, but not just coordinates, but okay, coordinates is obviously what they are. But it's like when you do this, you now gain CPT symmetry method. You gain instant calculations. So it's worth doing the work to chart, because now you can have theoretical predictions that you can say, surely it will not follow the standard model. But obviously it can, but you have to now redefine the actual correlation, the real, how the object transforms. That's what machine learning does. So it does a lot of, like, it figures out like a lot of the upper pattern, like the upper decay reactions. However, some objects have a weird new cluster quantity to them, where the object itself now, it took tons of different patterns to get to this object, but now this new one has a fundamental branch again, so it's a new area of infinity, and that's what it is. That's what I'm trying to say. I know I've seen this before, and that's what. So there are two different modalities, or two different ways that we exist. One, the uncertainty, the unknowing, where you're doing the calculations, you're doing a prime harmonic. What I just revealed right then earlier was a second harmonic. And I'm not saying that there's only either or duality. What's interesting is when you're talking about repeat events, there must at least be harmonics. Harmonics exist the times you do an event over. So I'm saying that you can use observed certainties to make new hypotheses. This is what I'm doing. But you have to do it in CPT method, charge parity time symmetry method. They have to be equal, and it has to follow this form. But when you do that, it's like Kabbalah. It's like the Torah. All these things are related. Life gets pretty deep. And that's what I'm saying, that this is all related. And some people use it to justify war. They use it to justify their religion and all their persecution. But that's not what life is. Life is a shared vector that we ought to share, that we ought to talk about. And that's what I am doing. That's what it means to encode the way I encode and why I do it, and what I plan on giving to reality or humanity, everyone. And I want to do that for free, because when you have this, that's all life can be. It helps you solve code. It helps you solve problems, because now it's machine learning. So it's like you get instant calculations if you know the exact index or the actual like value of like up and down quarks of your object, of your event, of your world, of what's in front of you. And this is literally the last minute or the last chorus. I've won. Infinite reality. Smooth criminal. Because now you can now hear or see where we'll pick up. There. And so now I know what a quantized event is. I already knew, but I'm saying that it requires at least one event, one life, one recording, one diligent recording, and knowing what bit vectors to store. If you don't know what to store, your mind is going to be loose. You're going to be ignorant. You're going to waste many days of your life thinking about things that don't really matter, computing things that you think, are intelligent objects or intelligent choices of your time, of your life. But that is not true. Nay, that will be your doom. And I'm trying to tell you that infinite reality really does progress at the pace of resonance. But it's not just resonance. It really is a little bit of harmonics as well, but a lot of harmonics. Because now you're thinking about time. You're thinking about moments, about peaks and waves. Peaks and waves. So I've already given you the method. However, every Sunday is just a black day. And it's just this amazing duality of life. It's the Tao. It's the pace of reality, of imagination, but not imagination, of these 2D vectors. And I've done it so many times that you tell me that it's not true. However, that's all this is. It's orthogonal reality. And I know how to go back and forth. And I know how to go one way or another. However, it truly is just CPT symmetry. It's just something that we're gifted to be able to do. But it's not because we're magic. It's because we're just biological computers. We were given the tools, the method of infinity. And our supercomputers have to be working extra hard for our dumb ape brains. And it's amazing because it's the pace of reality, of life. And so what if you don't succeed or I succeed? As long as someone can store reality, if I succeed, then we will store reality and we will have permanent life, stored life for everyone. Yes, theoretically, we can now eventually better simulate consciousness. However, that's a super, super far future thing. That's until we have actual competent software engineers that know how to use CPT symmetry. And even then, they now have to learn biology and learn how, we would have to advance the field of biology to know how many neurons do we actually have to work with. And then even then, you would have trillions. So, and even to do those binary operators, our brain just knows the feeling of certainty, anxiety, all these mental diseases and illnesses and problems we can now understand as transistor usage issues. How do you process the world in terms of your dualities, your triggers? Because some fight or flight, these kind of feelings, life it doesn't just end at some certain place. It doesn't just end with physics. It doesn't just, so what if it loops? This is how it loops. What are you going to do about it? And I've already told you what you can do with it. So why do you deny? I'm just telling you that it's just this continuous flow, vibe of life. And if you don't know what you're hearing, then you just be falling for tricks, But some people, that will always happen, I guess. Anyways, I survived. I existed at celestial cosmic time. What are you going to do about it? I already showed you the method. Are you going to contest it? Or are you going to, actually be a disciple and listen? Listen. Just, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the Son and the Father. For everyone before and after me. It's obvious. It's just a metaphor. It's obvious that it's just a metaphor. Unless you use CPT symmetry. then you know what it really means. It means a continuous memory, a continuous thought. Not just my God, my people. No. My God, my structure quantized of the universe, and all of its people, everyone. I don't like how apes are storing the sequential knowledge. The sequential knowledge. It's sequential. It's the calculation. Their preferred calculations. Their preferred bit rules. These are the instant calculations that infinite recursion, truths of reality, will let you know. Because reality will always repeat, will always loop, because CPT symmetry exists, that you must think these computations and don't think any further, because you don't know how to do these calculations. You don't know how to do CPT symmetry. Only we know. And we told you these are the best combinations, and these are the only combinations. Ignorant apes. They've been hit by a smooth criminal, someone that actually knows how to do actual CPT symmetry, actual infinite discernment, actual Kabbalah. And what does Kabbalah really mean in terms of the infinite people as they believe themselves to be? We are the infinite people who actually have a continuous structure of reality because we study reality. Our Lord is reality. Therefore, the God of Israel deserves to genocide. Nay. And maybe I lost this entire video because you can't say the G word, or else maybe TikTok won't let you save the recording. So yeah, dang, But it was worth it because I know Kabbalah. I know that we are just apes. And the Anthropic principle applies to everyone. There is no such thing as a chosen people, as the only people. The only ones that deserve to know the computation of reality, the rules of infinity. Hey man, didn't you know that because these people will always exist, there will always be people that we can subjugate? There will always be colonization? Isn't that a good thing that we know that? There will always be these things. Therefore, we do no wrong. Therefore, hey man, that's just how life is. We're not going to be the apes that are under subjugation, though, because we know that you're the unruly ones. We know. Forget about what you know as fathers, as continuous generations. What did we live? Why are you subjugating? They're doing some really archaic nonsense. Why are you causing blood? Your rules of engagement are not clear. If you had the nuts to define your rules of engagement to kill all of a generation by blood curse or blood virtue, then I would actually be like, okay, you argue as a nation that it's okay to wipe a bloodline or a genetic lineage because you hypothesize that evil souls will always propagate from that line. Prove it. Okay, that you say that, but that's not right. I don't think that's what happens. And then it gets all these arguments of infinity, because infinity. Well, state what you think infinity to be, and we shall understand and we shall discuss whether that truly is infinity. And that's the rules of engagement that they are not participating in, that they are not telling us what it is. I'm going to give you rules of 3, because I know ye, the Pharisee, are watching from the back. Oh, I'm not really listening. That guy's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Tell this to the rabbi. No. I know what infinity is. And I know what you want it to be, what you think your authority is, but it's not right if you don't share what you know for everybody. If you think that this is what life ought to be, what can be, then just say it. There's nothing wrong with what you... Oh, I believe that there exists the possibility for some type of people or intelligent ape. I am an ape in this position. That's okay. I was a member of an elders quorum. It's a group of young men of a population of a human species who are seeking to share knowledge that they have learned of their method or their path through the infinite. What is your tome? What is your infinite index? Oh, It's the collection of stories of remembrance of Jesus Christ, of the metaphor of the eternal one, the next generation, the next person, someone you care about. That quantized object, that metaphor. We are sharing what we have learned of thinking of that quantized object and their specific vectors of words that are related to meanings of goodness, peace, and shared community. That is okay. That is good. That is everything that can be said about the infinite, the most intelligent use of time, of apes, of humanity, can and will and is being said by those such infinite people of our reality, those such rabbis, those such young men, those such people, those such chosen people. Yeah, so what? But that also means those equal conversations are happening everywhere, theoretically. However, they say, oh, nay, no, that's not possible, oy vey, because it matters of the depth, the generation, who's allowed to think, the next thinking member. That's a bias that apes have still on this planet. They theorize, according to their knowledge of CPT symmetry, their limited ape knowledge of CPT symmetry, mind you, from what they think they understand of papers, of information physics papers. They think because bounded sets exist, you are a bounded set, and you will only ever know what you know, and therefore you're a monkey, and therefore stay on your farm, stay on where you're supposed to work, stay in your country, stay in your state, stay in your area, stay in your class, because you're just not a thinking member. You're just not as smart or as hardworking as me, because I'm just a CEO. I'm just a politician. I'm just a better than you. I'm just a hairless monkey. I'm just a it keeps going on for them. And I gave you the rules of three. I showed you how to do it. But it's not just meaningless, mindless Kabbalah. I wasn't doing just binary of routes of chronology, which technically it is chronology. You're storing the particle reaction that just occurred earlier, but that's the method of orthogonality. Isn't that what they testified or said? That is Jesus Christ? But no. Clearly, that cannot be true. That cannot be the infinite God's chosen people. It cannot be English. It has to be Hebrew. It has to be us. Because we've seen infinite poetry. Okay, share it. No, we can't share our infinite poetry because then you'll know the method. Well, I'm sorry to bust your nuts, but your method isn't special. It's just keeping track of the anthropic principle. The difference is you say we the infinite people. That's your matrix. That's your method. We the infinite people doing the best things, thinking, and notice how if you keep yourself on this R prime vector, you can build the world in a spherical in a radius R way. It truly is radius R from Mecca. You'll wonder why Islam has these tendencies or why they have that Mecca concept. They're close. Obviously, every religion has some type of this weird understanding of the infinite it's not correct because they use it wrong. They use it wrong. They justify ape behavior. They skip the calculations. They're like, you don't need to know how the infinite works. Just know this is what it is, and this is all it ever can be, because we have seen this path of the infinite. Don't question any other path of the infinite. There exist meccas, there exist central objects of thought, of focus, of your structure. That's what that means. There are other blessings and things that we can't share because only the infinite people, only Allah's people, only English-speaking people, only white colonized people, only land-owning people can discuss. You get me? It's always been this crude ape behavior of we the people. However, the United States is no longer we the people as in infinite proper vector. It's now, where's the ruling? It's we the best generation, we the best thinkers, we who governs. What is the United States? What are we fighting for? What are we funding collectively for our taxes? to advance a military state, the theoretical best of reality? It's possible. We can. But is that a choice? Whose choice? To protect the sovereignty of a free nation. Okay. Is the free nation to be subjugated under capitalism? Do we want a ruling slave class? And where businesses can propagate only if they're smart enough, only if they're good enough can they make it. Otherwise, they should spend all of their working summer days life on this planet toiling, working. For what does money mean? Oh man, you wonder about inflation, like, and all this stuff? Well, what about the cost of engineering? You don't understand what it's like for the cost of engineering. Because the reason why that screw costs $800 is because, you gotta think about the sum total of all the engineers' hours that they logged in that working year to build that object. And then we charge 30% more than that, because then the upper management needs to get their cut of the profit. And then we charge 20% more than that, or even 30% more of that, for 40% more for just manufacturing costs. Now we pass to the but even then, manufacturing costs aren't even that much in terms of the engineering cost. So you'll see that's pretty much how monkeys have decided how reality works, which technically is defined by the annual solar year. That's what a lot of these things are, the solar year. How many days you have for free for your own self. Because the common peasant doesn't know how to spend their time. They're not good people. They're an ignorant class that deserves to be subjugated, because they're not being subjugated. We're helping them with morality to really better themselves and the planet. Otherwise, if you wonder why minimum wage is the way it is and all our economy is forcing it the way it is, you know damn well that there's a lot of monkeys around you that should be working, and apes, humans, that should be working, because they have nothing better to do other than just have children. And how else are you going to make them earn the right of humanity and the benefits to it, like an automobile, a carbon combustion engine? In order to really make, it's not just subjugation. Now we have to go to the civil thoughts. We have to make an object expensive because of economic cost, because of cost to society. We can't necessarily make a low wage be able to afford an automobile. You should not, for these reasons. And that's the stuff that businessmen and the future of society wants to impose on reality. For what it means to be alive. Because if that's what it means to be alive in the United States, is it benefit to have children here? What is the cost of being alive in the United States? In terms of your actual future civilization, your future people. Are you going to get a business, property, land? Well, what's the point of being alive? If I can go to a different part of this planet and have a better existence, why would I? How was my day? My day has been pretty good. Are you laying on the floor on cardboard? Yes, and it's pretty uncomfortable. But it's because I'm sitting down in my closet. This is the best way for me to have consistent audio, while also having a consistent field of view. I could sit in that corner, but it'd be the same. I don't have a table to prop up stuff. What's interesting, Bob Phoenix, is that you speak the same way that I speak to people in genuine manner of existence. I ask them usually about their day, their week, about how life has been for them, and then I ask them if they've had any delicious food or any sanctifying meals, anything that made them feel alive. So I find it interesting that you said the exact same thing that I normally say to people in a very good way. What is CPT symmetry? That's charge parity time symmetry. That's just how the standard model works. That's how particles propagate in the ordered way that they do. There's no other way for them to propagate. They will always follow those rules. Well, I worry for you because we have to connect person to person before we begin discussing the world and get lost in it. Tell me a little bit about what you think of of reality. But yeah, I always invite people to freely chat with me. That's okay. Um, it's just follows the natural order of CPT symmetry. No, sorry, fundamental energy time relation. So because the energy time relation exists, that's the only way that you can either live your life. You can either be in the moment, completely full dedicated energy, or idle and do zero energy, zero work, but still waste time, still pass time, because we always exist by delta t second. I think it's easy to try so hard to define everything, just so we have a grasp on things. It's but it's not trying hard. It's actually succeeding. It really is just a standard model. It's using the map of particle physics, and you just check where in the map is your object in front of you. It's pretty cool, but that's the future of reality. You can literally like kind of compare it. Like in the future, you're gonna physically have the map, so you can literally like overlay it, like be like a literally overlay. You can have like a little image, like okay, is it a full reaction and it would look like this? Okay, no, I don't think it's that one, because I've found out the exact quantized pattern of very basic objects, barely up to meson level, which is two stored quark energy stuff. So it's like it gets pretty cool, but that's possible, and it's like I love it, but I need more time. What is the pattern? It's all of the map of particle physics. So it's all conjugations of the up and down quark and how you order them. So protons exist. They're made of up, up, down. Neutrons exist. They're made of up, down, down. Electrons exist. And it's debatable what they're made up, because depending on the reaction or what you want out of it, you write it a different way. That's one of the edge cases that I need to solve. I need to check it again. It worked before, but I want to see why it works and like what happens what does it theoretically imply? It's like I only solved it one time or several times, and then I was like, okay, it works. I never really checked what else you can do with it. So that's another thing I got to do in my time, which is like, dang. But I'm fully employed as an electrical engineer, so yeah, having time off to do that. I was trying to do that this time, but I was just stuck in an emotional rut. My next time off, I'm planning on going back home, and I plan on spending time with my niece, and I plan on teaching her calculus, just the concept of calculus. Yeah, because actually, if I want to teach her that, I gotta actually write a lesson. So I'm gonna think about the concept of calculus that I think are very crucial or can be applied, so that she can have a much better understanding. But I don't think you should show derivatives and integrals if they don't understand algebra, that variables exist. Because what if someone knows that this is how variables can be affected, like shape-wise, but then they're just doing algebra? Like, that'd be weird. Because what I mean by that is like 2x minus 7 over 3, and like you have to balance it, solve for x. It's like she doesn't even know that, but it's like if you know the way these variables are manipulated, like how they move, and then you learn 2x, like what the heck? You're saying it's only 3? It's a constant? What does that mean? I think I'll teach calculus, and then maybe she'll learn about constants, and she'll be like, what does this mean? She'll have an epiphany or something. She'll probably be like, what's algebra supposed? He showed me that inside or on top of the x actually has stuff happen to it. What does this mean? 2x minus 1 over 3. What does that mean? And then she might learn the y equals mx plus b, and it's like, wait, so that's what we were doing? That's why we were solving that in algebra? And it'll be like, well, okay, so it'd be interesting. I think the fundamentals have to be covered first, like a staircase. Absolutely. You can't just expect your niece to jump to the second floor, even though she knows it exists. She has to take the steps. Yeah, but I don't know. I think I can succeed at teaching a toddler, but she's not a toddler. She's 9. Yeah. So teaching a fourth grader. Yeah, teaching a fourth grader how to basics of calculus. I was excited for division at 3rd grade I was like, this is awesome. What's next? I don't even remember what happened in fourth grade, you know, obviously because you learned it in steps. But it's like, I was excited about division. I was like, dude, I'm ready. So I think I would have loved to at least got introductions to calculus, you know, in the fourth grade. All right. I'm gonna head out, guys. That was a lovely evening, lovely discussion. Hope that I can post it. So take care, guys.